Right now, though, let's turn our attention to what's been happening in Italy. Well, they have just had an election. We discussed it on the show yesterday, as it was very clear that the leader, Giorgia Meloni, of the Brothers... what is their party called? Brothers of Italy party was the biggest party as a result of those elections, and she will be becoming Prime Minister as a head of a coalition of 4 right-wing parties. She's been called far-right, but again, a lot of the things she's been saying will really echo with a lot of voters across the centre ground. Let's talk to Dr. Paolo Chiocchetti, who's a political scientist at the European University Institute. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, I mean, coalition politics is where it's at in Italy with the PR system, and it was very clear to anyone voting for any of these 4 parties, including Berlusconi's party, that it would be Giorgia Meloni who would be the Prime Minister if they did vote in that election. She's on course to be the Prime Minister, the first female Prime Minister. A lot of focus is on her links with the party's links with a fascist party in the past, her talking about being inspired by Benito Mussolini, and her constantly being described as far-right. Is she far-right? Are her policies far-right?
Well, her history certainly comes from a political tradition which directly derived from the fascist parties in the 40s, and the party she grew up into was a post-fascist party, which then took some distance from the legacy of Mussolini and fascist Italy and turned into a kind of right-wing conservative party. About her program, her main political proposals do not say much, are not really a threat for the democratic setting of the country. She does indeed favor presidentialism, a presidential reform of the party, but otherwise her political positions are more or less in tune with conservative parties across Europe and Eastern Europe.
Well, this is the interesting thing, isn't it? She talks about, the nation state. Certainly Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, didn't like the sound of that, doesn't like the idea of national sovereignty. Well, most voters in most European countries feel quite strongly about that, actually. Talks about the importance of the family. She's been talked about as being anti-LGBT rights, but actually, again, largely along the lines of most people's views that they don't really want this stuff stuffed down children's throats at school. She was opposed to, I think, gay civil partnerships, but changed her stance on that. But again, that was a stance that's only a very recent sort of change in viewpoint in most European countries, and certainly that would be the stance of large parts of Eastern Europe as well, whether we like it or not. So it's quite interesting how a lot of the things that we're told these are far-right stances, anti-immigration, a mass-scale immigration that Italy has seen. These are the very policies which will have attracted many middle, moderate, right-wing voters and centre voters to her party, surely.
We must say that she will have to focus on this kind of social issue in the next 5 years, because from an economic point of view, social and economic policy, much of what will be done is already dictated by agreements with the European Union, by the constraints of the Eurozone, by the debt burden of Italy. So we can expect that she will try to focus much on issues such as family, LGBT areas, and migration and security.
And migration is certainly a very, very big issue in Italy. I mean, as it is across large parts of Europe. We've seen in France, in Austria, we've seen in Denmark, Sweden, and of course in the UK, a huge big factor in elections. In terms of her relationship with the EU, there's some Brexiteers talking about, Italy quitting the EU. Is that likely to be a policy?
No, the party is traditionally nationalist, but over the last couple of years, in view of her election as a Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni has given reassurances to the EU, the United States and NATO, so she has adopted a very clear pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-Ukraine course.
Right.
So we cannot expect much change on these kind of international issues.
OK, well, it's going to be fascinating to watch, isn't it? Dr. Paolo Chiocchetti, thank you very much indeed for joining us there from the European University Institute.